Hello, welcome once again to the Keto Bipolar podcast. This is a podcast where myself and Matt Bizicki speak to people with lived experience of bipolar disorder, adhering to a ketogenic diet. And this has been a really interesting journey for us because when we started this podcast, there was very, very little research in this area. And we always talked about how cool it would be to do a trial, like a pilot trial of a ketogenic diet in bipolar patients. And so 8 episodes in, we have our first participant from a pilot trial of a ketogenic diet for bipolar disorder, which is very cool. Oliver Seligman is a really remarkable individual in many ways. And he's an author. He's studying a master's in psychology at the University of Edinburgh. And his book, Befriending Bipolar, which focuses on lithium and descriptions of mood instability and bipolar and kind of finding balance, has been really influential for psychiatrists and across the bipolar community. It's one of the kind of most respected books for being a great description of patient lived experience. So really, Oliver comes to this with a great way of describing his experience of bipolar and a lot of respect from the psychiatry community and patient community that he's built up over many years. And so we're really interested to interview him about his experience on our pilot trial of a ketogenic diet for bipolar. So Oliver, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me. It's very nice to see you both.
What's up, dude? Thanks for coming on.
Where are you calling from? You're calling from, is it somewhere in the northern latitudes today that
I'm in Oslo. I'm in our basement in Oslo. I've spent the afternoon trying to make the place look respectable with the plant and the
nice.
picture.
It looks
Nice.
phenomenal. It's very aesthetic
It's
with
a
the
Thanks very
very
much.
simplicity of it.
it's a very balanced composition. I like
Yeah.
that.
Well,
These
the problem is I've been trying to like blur the background, but I haven't managed to figure it out. So I went this way instead.
nice. Okay.
It's much
The
better than a blurred background. Blurred background is like cheating and just
yeah.
masking whatever's there.
Usually my 2 and 4 year old jumping into the back of the call at some point. It's I was doing an interview with my son just down the corridor, and he came and climbed on my shoulders whilst I was on the call, which was interesting. So I think your background is about right. So thanks for making time to speak today. And basically it's been quite a journey because you joined our pilot trial of a ketogenic diet. And then since then, you've been speaking publicly about your experience and sharing. And so the first question I had was what kind of drew you towards this trial and what made you want to participate in the ketogenic diet pilot trial?
It was pure fate. I was in Edinburgh and I went to a bipolar Edinburgh sort of support group meeting. They're a charity in Edinburgh for people with bipolar, and they talked about this pilot scheme that you were running, and I thought, why not? Fantastic. Yeah.
And had you come across ketogenic diet before hearing this meeting about it?
Well, apparently I had. My wife insists that she tried to get me on a keto diet about 5 years ago, but I didn't remember any of that. So for me, it was the first time.
Fantastic. Um, so when you were going through the trial, what was the point at which you began to feel this, if indeed you did, that this might be having a change in your symptoms? Was there a point where you really thought, oh, something's changed here, that I haven't noticed before?
Well, I think I was very lucky because I think I went into ketosis pretty quickly. My wife and I, we differ in our timeline, but I think it took about 3 or 4 days to get into ketosis. She reckons it was a couple of weeks. I had been doing a bit of fasting, in the years before, on and off, so not sure which one it was, but very quickly, I describe it, I guess, as my brain was kind of having a warm bath. It was like this kind of almost visceral calmness came over me, and it was such a relief because having a bipolar brain, as you guys know, there's often a lot of kind of hardness to our experience of life. There's a kind of an intensity and an energy and a kind of almost an animalistic experience that one has to sort of try and control. I've often had the experience where I have to sort of try and be nice in a situation because I know if I kind of surrender to that feeling, I'll be mean to someone or I'll be impatient or I'll say the wrong thing. And when I went into ketosis, it was just like this, like, oh, it was fantastic.
What
It's
do you tell us more about that? Like animalistic? What do you mean by that?
Well, I was on a high dose of lithium for 30 years. I'm now on a much lower dose. I've been tapering for the last 2.5 years, and lithium, it helped me in many ways. It stopped me having, severe episodes, but it also made me so angry and so intense. And this kind of lack of ability to feel anything meant that my go-to, I would always call it was animalistic. Luckily I had a reasonable amount of self-control, so I didn't go around sort of beating people or smashing windows and stuff. But often that was just intensity of emotion where you just want to smash something up or smash someone up or smash yourself up, that was there, and that was a big part of my life, and it was something that just came and went, and I didn't know what to do about it.
And so
It's funny.
what did you think when it finally like what was your reaction when you went on keto and this just kind of the warm bath like you're talking about?
I was like, this is it. I was like, I'd kind of suspected for years that I would find something, because I didn't think anyone really deserved to live in the way a lot of people with bipolar live, on these meds. And I just kind of was just hoping. And when it arrived, I was like, oh my God, this is it. This is really, really cool.
It's funny hearing you describe like that intensity of emotion, because I've only known you since after the pilot trial, and we met after the trial had completed, and you're one of the most calm, placid, balanced people I ever speak to, actually. In fact, many times I think that people we interview on this podcast are more balanced than a lot of normal people I speak to who don't have bipolar. And so it was it was really funny to hear you describe that, and I think a lot of people do feel like that. Like you describe a hardness to your experience in your book, Befriending Bipolar. You talked about experiencing mania and the kind of the highs of mania and how it can, bring out kind of these, aspects of one's character. And so it's really it's really remarkable to, having read your book, see what in a kind of balanced place you are. And I watch your YouTube channel, which is called Thriving with Bipolar. I recommend people check it out.
It's actually
And
Live Better with Bipolar now. I
sorry,
changed it
oh yeah,
because I've got
live
bipolar. We tend to do that.
fantastic. Live better with bipolar. So definitely check it out because it has some of Oliver's experiences. So what has it been like since the trial completed? Did you immediately decide to remain in ketosis ongoing, or has it been a journey for you?
No, I think I took it for granted after the first few weeks. The initial ketosis was amazing. And then I kind of, got used to it and went on living life and having an easier time. But I don't think I fully appreciated what I'd stumbled on. So I kind of drifted back into eating normally, which had been very healthy, which is great. And I didn't notice any immediate effects, but after a few weeks and a few months, I just noticed that hardness coming back and becoming more reactive to things and becoming just more abrasive and a bit more sort of difficult. And I woke up one morning. It was a very cool experience. I woke up one morning and I was in that stage between sleep and waking up, and it was almost like being punched in the heart. It was this like visceral experience of I have to do keto. This is it. And since then it's been incredibly easy. The first time I started keto, I found it hard work because I was on so much lithium that doing all the maths and trying to figure things out was difficult. But the second time round, it was almost like the decision was made for me. And I tried carnivore for, I think, 6 weeks, which was also fantastic because meant that when I went back on keto, I had all this like variation. Whereas
Yeah.
before I'd find it quite limited, but after being on carnivore, I was like, this is a party.
So
It's
did you
how
notice any differences between carnivore and like keto with avocados and olive oil and stuff like that?
I did. I noticed on carnivore, like I lost about 6 kilos in 2 or 3 weeks, and I felt really good, and I looked good. I haven't really done any exercise for 15 years because of the lithium side effects. But I looked and felt good. I described it as this kind of almost animalistic happiness about me. Like I was full of energy and I was alert, but it wasn't hypomania. I still felt relaxed in myself, but I just felt very, very good. I had really bad diarrhea. I had that for the
Mm.
whole 6 weeks, and so it didn't go as quickly as I'd hoped it would. But honestly, that was a small part price to pay because without, I suppose, getting too graphic, it was once every 2 or 3 days, and that wasn't a big problem. Yeah.
You're saying you
It's
couldn't exercise for 15 years because of the lithium side effects?
Yeah.
What went on there? I mean, that's awful.
Yeah. It's been quite tough. I mean, When I went on lithium, it worked for the first, 8 to 10 years really well, but it also just killed my emotions, But I didn't also really notice because I was 19, I was 18 and a half when I went on it. So I wasn't really used to that side of life anyway. Um, but then I came off it, I think after about 20 years. I'm not so good on the timeline. Um, and I came off it, that went totally wrong. I didn't replace it with anything. I went slowly, but I didn't tell anyone. I didn't speak to any psychiatrists. The internet wasn't really a thing then. And I ended up in a mental hospital in Australia, in total madness, having, been sectioned by the police, for rolling around naked in the garden when there was a family next door having barbecue. Wasn't my finest of moments. Um, but I then spent about 2.5 years trying to survive without lithium, trying other medications like Seroquel and Lanzapine and Sobril and other things like that. They didn't work either. It's almost like I was allergic to medication. And then I went back on lithium. I decided to do that. I was like, I have to do something. And it worked, but I got really bad migraines. And so I would have a couple of migraines most weeks. So basically, I haven't worked properly for 15 years. I've done a bit of part-time stuff, but it kind of killed my life, and made me very, very tired and, lots of other things, a lot of hallucinations, things like that. So I had this long period of time where I was too afraid to look for anything else because I kind of tried, I kind of done my best, um, and so I just accepted it. And funnily enough, as soon as I really accepted it, like I was just like, well, because I'd found a lot of happiness through meditation. Yeah, I'd found an ability to accept things, and it wasn't a kind of a passive acceptance. It wasn't like, oh, I'm beaten by life, I have to be happy. It was a genuine happiness, but my life was my life was screwed. Um, so I think that going off lithium and then coming back on it was a real killer because I think it really affected me badly the second time round.
How how would you describe in befriending bipolar the experience of lithium, and that it kind of takes it kind of almost balances you in a way, compared to the extremes of the emotions before. How would you compare going on lithium to then also adding ketogenic diet? Was it a different experience? You described some of the kind of sedation on lithium and the difficulties with lithium. How was it going into ketosis, compared with going into lithium for the first time? Is it a different kind of treatment in your perspective?
Yeah, it was a completely different experience. I remember the second time I kind of went on lithium, um, was in a mental hospital in Norway, and it was a really tough decision because I'd spent, I think a couple of years actually coming off lithium very, very slowly. It'd been a nightmare. I'd been in psychosis and depression and stuff, but I'd finally come off it, and all the experts were telling me this is going to get better, this is going to get better, but it didn't. And so eventually I'm in this mental hospital, and they were very kind to me there. They didn't pressure me to take drugs or anything. They just said, look, we want to support you and help you figure this out. And as soon as they had taken that approach with me, very quickly I kind of decided I've got to go back on lithium. There's nothing else. I've tried all the drugs that they'll give me, and I've tried without. So I remember the evening of going back on lithium, which was super scary. And I remember them handing me the pills in this like plastic cup. Those plastic cups that are everywhere all over the world. Hopefully one day they won't be, but they are at the moment. And I remember sort of throwing it in my mouth and drinking the water and just going back to my room and just lying down and putting my head under the covers and just waiting to see what happened. And it was the weirdest experience because I noticed the tinnitus suddenly. I hadn't really had tinnitus, and it just upped. And I was like, oh shit. And then I almost felt my brain solidify. It was a strange feeling. It was like, it wasn't a bad thing, but it was really scary because in that moment, it was like I was saying goodbye to emotions. And I had had my emotions back for a couple of years, and I liked them. And it was like hardening of the whole thing. And I had this moment of just like terror. It was like, oh God, what am I doing? And just desperation. And then that hardened, and it was fine. And from then on, I just kind of got on with it for a few years.
I
How
think we're going to learn like a lot about these psych meds as people are starting to have big question marks already about them. And I know for me doing keto and seeing how effective it was for me, I've become so pessimistic about the psych meds, and it's almost like I can't help it. It's a normal reaction, I think, having gone through the whole system of psychiatry and gone to psych wards and tried dozens of these medications and come off them and had severe withdrawal effects and now coming to the realization that none of them were actually treating the root cause of my illness, which was my metabolic dysfunction, and that if we had just done a ketogenic diet and sleep hygiene and regular exercise, we would have cured that. And I've just become so pessimistic about these psych meds. Is that the case for you as well?
No, it's not actually, Matt. I mean,
Okay,
I've
good. Tell me
definitely,
more. I want to hear
yeah,
more.
you're helping millions of people now. Like I watch your channel and I was very much looking forward to meeting you. Like I love your passion and your bravery and I love what you're doing. I love that you're taking the resources you have and doing good with them. I think there's nothing more heroic than that, to be honest. Um, but I think there's a real danger in being too angry too long with the psychiatry, with the meds and whatever. Because if you hadn't been through what you've been through, you wouldn't change the future of hundreds of thousands of people. You need people, you need brave souls to kind of almost like volunteer for the job, and they need to go through shit and come out of it, and then they can tell their story. And I also, there are plenty of psychiatrists who are dickheads. There are plenty of people in the world who are idiots and they're in their own belief systems and they're closed down and they're not open to stuff. But there are a lot of psychiatrists and psychologists and people who are really doing their best, and they get indoctrinated with this information. And the people who indoctrinate them, they were indoctrinated too, you know, um, and it just has an inertia to it. And so I have a philosophical view of it. Like I did not enjoy going through the suffering I went through, but my God, it's equipped me to make a difference. And so I'm going to really enjoy that. And there's such a danger when there's a revolution, and this is a revolution that's happening. It's pretty cool. When there's a revolution, the revolutions that fail, which by the way is most of them, most horrible dictatorships get replaced with another horrible one. But when there's a revolution, it's so easy for people to get carried away with the anger and the opposition. And for me, I just want to point out the alternative and focus on the good stuff. And I gave a talk in Norway to about, I think, 55 psychiatrists, and they were all under 40. They were so open. They were so interested in what I had to say. They so wanted alternatives. And I see our strength, within the keto community as putting forward an alternative rather than getting too pissed off with what's happened. That's how I see it.
I mean, I agree with you 100% with everything you're saying. I think there's a difference between recognizing that the treatments we have are severely dysfunctional and viewing this as an institutional problem that we have to fix and we have to address this. And that doesn't necessarily mean being angry at the individual psychiatrists who are doing their best, who are trying to treat people, who are good people. But like we have to recognize this massive institutional problem in psychiatry and that, you know, we we test these meds, we don't take people off them. Um, we know they're not treating the root cause. They're causing a lot of damage of people having to taper off them and have severe withdrawal effects. And so, like, we have a big problem here. We have to recognize that. And I think just acknowledging that and acknowledging that the system we have isn't working, it doesn't necessarily equate to anger. It doesn't equate to resentment. It doesn't mean we have to feel all of those things. So when I say that I've become pessimistic, it doesn't mean that I have anger, although I do have a little resentment, but it more just means like an understanding that the system we have isn't working, an understanding that the tools that psychiatrists are equipped with at the moment are not the correct tools. And so we can go in and talk to them and try to change that. But I don't think I'll push back. And I don't think that necessarily means we should be angry about that and about these things. And so I agree with you on that point 100% for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I think when I watch your channel, I don't see someone who's angry at all. I see someone who's very balanced, taking a very intelligent way forward. That's what I see. That's why when you said you were very pessimistic and everything, it was like that was news to me, and I get that. And there are definitely times when I have that experience. Um, but what I see you doing and what I see Ian doing, and quite a few of the other advocates doing, is basically going through forward with this probably amazing solution. And yeah, I mean, I think it's totally natural that people go through experiences of feeling angry or um, even a bit depressed about how much they've lost on psych meds. I've definitely experienced that for a few years. I was really pissed off. And I was pissed off with a lot of people who I thought gave me terrible advice. A lot of them were experts, a lot of them were people I trusted. And I was resentful and everything. And I'm glad I went through that because it was another experience. It means I can understand people more when they're going through it. Um, but I definitely see that my sort of strength within this community and within this message it came when I kind of let go of that. And that's what I see with you too. I don't see an angry person who's kicking back against everyone. I see someone who's making intelligent videos that are questioning the status quo and that are appealing to intelligent people. Because so many people within this community, whether they're psychiatrists or whether they're people with bipolar or other mental illnesses, they're so bright. They don't want a bunch of people smashing on drums and saying we hate psychiatrists. They want intelligent solutions, and I think that's what we're giving them.
I totally resonate with that because when we have people on this, some people have this perception that maybe metabolic psychiatry is sort of, could be to be fair, that's a very niche view, but some people might think it's anti-psychiatry or anti-medication, and we're not at all. We're patients who've been through the whole treatment gamut in many cases and have had experiences where we think there's room for this to improve and develop and become better because of the side effects and because of the metabolic problems that we have. And psychiatry went through so many different phases of treatment. Initially there was the kind of people were put in asylums essentially and kind of cast away from society. And then there was the moral treatment movement where people came out of asylums and they were integrated into life. And the benefit of pharmacology was that it allowed people to be treated at home and not be in asylums. And that was an improvement, for people that rather than being locked up. But there was still a lot of limitations to that. And there was kind of treatments that were very brutal, like instant shock therapy, things that were very harmful to a lot of people in the past in psychiatry. And I think there's still an element where the treatments that we have are a form of kind of outdated treatment in terms of, it's people were given lobotomies and things like this before, which are, you can hardly imagine it now, but in some sense, you do have such an inhibition, like you're describing, of your function, your ability to live a full life on the medications, that there is room for improvement. But they're also powerful and useful tools for many people that are life-saving, and we've all benefited from, the stability that those medications could bring. So we're definitely not in metabolic psychiatry anti-medication or not, by no means. These things help many people, but we should also push to improve the treatments. Like, we should push them to work through better mechanisms. And I think that's what we're starting to discover in metabolic psychiatry. So how would you describe going to ketosis compared to lithium? You described some of the difficulties with that treatment. How would you describe going into ketosis compared with going on lithium?
Well, the going on lithium was kind of like a concreting my head. Going into ketosis was like oh, it was lovely. It was like, when you lie in a bath and it's just warm and you just go back and you go underneath and it's like, oh, you probably don't speak to yourself because you'd swallow half the water, but you know what I mean? Yeah, it was just relaxing and lovely and it made me more alert, which was really
It's
cool.
it's hard for people to understand, but when you're with bipolar, your brain can be really, really hyperactive, and the anxiety is like a constant background noise in your life. It's like having a white noise playing constantly. And I find that going into ketosis, especially above like 1.5, 2 millimolar, that noise just turns down and you can focus and you can think clearly and things, come into focus in a way that they're not out of ketosis for me. And I think that's something that's really underappreciated. Is like, even if you're not in hospital or having massive symptoms, there's a kind of background noise to your life. This pilot study was studying euthymic patients, which means people aren't in a major mood episode. But even in that state, the background anxiety and depression that can come with bipolar is really significant. Um, so one of the cool things about the pilot is we got to also look at brain imaging and metabolomics and blood tests, and maybe some of these things can speak to your personal experience of the improvement. We saw things like physical health benefits. You described weight loss, which is an important thing for people taking medications. Many of our medications make us put on weight. We saw reductions in blood pressure on average. And we also saw remarkably reductions in brain glutamate. And so one of the things I wanted to speak to you about is, this kind of background noise, this anxiety that you described with bipolar that kind of turns down in ketosis. We found that in many previous MRS studies, glutamate is elevated in people with bipolar, and this is an excitatory neurotransmitter. It kind of lights up the brain, makes it, overactive. And this appears to come down when you give people when people go into ketosis. So we saw this excitatory neurotransmitter glutamate reducing in the brain. Has it been interesting for you to see kind of biomarkers associated potentially with some of these states through the study? We
Y-
the publication came out early this week with the brain imaging findings and blood tests for people watching this.
Well, I'm hoping that if there's anything that needs to be sort of healed versus bipolar, I'm hoping that keto's doing that. I've got no scientific evidence of it, but it just, to me, it just makes sense that once we start treating the brain correctly by feeding it with ketones, and once we start reducing things like glutamate, and obviously we do a lot of the other metabolic strategies that you guys both talk about, and also we become more aware, like we become different people. It, I think that there's a very, very real chance that a lot of people could actually heal bipolar. I mean, I know Matt on his channel, he's talked a lot about going to like long-term remission, which I think is the sort of the clever way to talk about healing because there's not so much kickback on that. But I think long and short of it is that you are healed if that's the case. Because if someone's gone for 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 years without an episode and they're living a normal life, well, like when do you say they're healed? Do you wait till they're 80, or do you say actually this is impossible to heal? Wait till next lifetime. So for me, the biomarkers that I've noticed is it's really easy now for me to get into over 2 millimoles ketosis. It's super easy. I just jam in the fats, which I love. I have this lovely keto mix that I have like of coconut cream, stevia, pretend sugar, and a bit of chocolate, no carb or low carb chocolate powder. And it's great. It tastes better than chocolate mousse with sugar. And so if ever I just feel like I'm getting a bit shaky or whatever, I just have some of that, which I love. And within probably within an hour, the ketones have just upped. And so it seems like my body is adapting to this way of living. I've also noticed, because a few times I've done like a conscious experiment of having some carbs just to see. And sometimes I do actually feel that maybe I actually should have some carbs. I don't really know why. It's an intuitive thing. So if I'm being healthy, I'll have an apple. If I'm being unhealthy, I'll have some chips. Um, and obviously my ketones drop, but very, very quickly, like the same day, they'll come back up, which is fabulous. Yeah.
Yeah, I
So,
want to hit on a couple important points you talked about. Number one is eating enough fat. So I notice that even if I fast, my ketones don't get up as high as I'd like them to, but pounding the fat is what really bumps my ketones up more than anything. So like I've even been starting every day with a couple tablespoons of pork lard. So I'll literally just put the pork lard in a bowl, heat it up in the microwave, and then drink it down. And so that has really been boosting my ketones. The other thing you mentioned, Oliver, that I think is so important is people come to think of this as a lifetime diagnosis and people become identified with having the illness. And I think I was fortunate that I was so manic during those 2 years that I didn't take that on myself. And so it was easy to disassociate from the bipolar illness when I actually started to recover and go into remission. I stopped having manic episodes. I started to have a stable mood. I didn't have depression. Everything was fine. Um, Not perfect, but like very, very good. And so I think for people who have come to identify with this illness over many, many years and see themselves as sick and see this as a big part of their identity, it can be so hard. And I know, Lauren Kenny has talked about this on her channel, like it kind of shakes up our reality to realize that this is actually just metabolic dysfunction and that by healing our metabolism, we can heal the root cause. And I think for a lot of people who have mental illnesses and especially doctors, it's a hard thing to acknowledge. And so I don't blame people. I don't blame doctors for not believing this. And there are a lot of like hocus pocus, you're going to do this diet, it's going to heal you stuff out there that's just been going on for many, many years. Um, I hope we can start to change that paradigm as this becomes more mainstream and start to think about this really, truly as not a lifetime diagnosis, but just metabolic health manifesting as mental illness. And then if we treat the metabolic health, people will recover and can see their illnesses put into remission or just much, much easier to manage.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I think it's incredibly exciting times. And it's amazing to be dumped in the middle, as we all have been actually. We've all been dumped in the middle of of a revolution, of something that could potentially change the world more than the discovery of penicillin. I mean, it really can do that because, mental illness is it's much easier for people to relate to physical illness because you can see it, and people have been through physical stuff and they think, oh my God, I don't want that to ever happen again. But mental illness is more invisible, and yet it's affecting, I think it's something like one or 1.5 billion people worldwide, and it's not just affecting them, it's affecting everything around them and their whole way they perceive life, and even their levels of luck go down when they're feeling down. Everything goes down. And if you can start raising that on a national or a global level, I genuinely think you can change the whole world. And I don't think that's like a crazy thing to say. I think if you take a bunch of people who are miserable and having a terrible time, even if you get them to average, the world changes.
Yeah,
I
and people don't talk about it, right? Like, go ahead, Ian. But I mean, people
yeah.
don't. Everyone this going on. We just don't see it, and people think they're the only one, and it's totally not the case.
I totally agree with you that it can change the world on a rational basis, and one of the ways that's scientifically being demonstrated is I'm highly skeptical of the use of GLP-1s, but what they are showing is that in the population there's a massive metabolic dysfunction occurring across millions of people, and when they've introduced these, they study it for all these different conditions, and it seems to help with almost everything they study it for. And I'm not a proponent of this approach. I prefer diet and exercise and so forth. But what it is showing is that if you affect metabolism, it helps everything. All the organ systems, all the many types of chronic disease can improve if you improve metabolism. And so there's no reason to think this doesn't extend to the brain. If it's affecting every organ of the body so profoundly, why would the brain be isolated in some way from this? Clearly, the brain is affected by this metabolic dysfunction affecting hundreds of millions of people. So if you improve the metabolic function of the body and the brain, then you are going to have improvements in cognitive function, in mood regulation. It's a complete common sense. And they are seeing this through these types of studies at the moment. But I think what ketosis is the evolutionary consistent approach. For millions of years, life was evolving in periods of ketosis and long periods of ketosis, through the winter in certain species and through humans eating the hide, the kind of fat of animals. If you look at the hide of a kind of animal that was hunted many years ago, it would have hundreds of calories or thousands of calories of fat on it. And so when you're describing Matt eating like lard in the morning, to some people this is like, oh my gosh, it's outside of their, but actually it's evolutionary consistent, that type of diet, eating lots of fat. And so I think one of the really exciting things is you're describing about, could this be some not a lifelong condition? And we have seen that in epilepsy where ketosis is used, that if you take a young person with epilepsy and you put them on a ketogenic diet for 1 or 2 years, if you speak to Denise Potter, for example, one of the leading dietitians in the US, she says that over 50% of her kids will go into lifelong remission of seizures. I mean, isn't that remarkable that the brain can heal for something as extreme as epilepsy? So to think that that's possible with bipolar, I don't think it's outside the realms of possibility that this could happen in bipolar, that young people might do this for a period of time. It heals the brain, the metabolism, and that they don't have to go through this kind of suffering and journey that we've experienced, which is a very hopeful prospect. So I agree with you, like this could be really life-changing for many people. So one of the things I wanted to highlight is that you've and it's quite rare for this to happen in a psychiatry trial, but you've set up your own YouTube channel and you're writing. I think are you writing a new book at the moment on kind of this topic? You wrote Befriending Bipolar before, which I highly recommend people check out. What is the topic of your new book about?
Well, my new book is about my journey with ketosis and other strategies that have worked for me. And the way I'm doing it is I'm trying to take each strategy by itself and talk about it and put in some crazy stories, because I've had quite a few crazy stories in the last 30 years, which is great fun and people love to read that stuff. It stops things being too dry. And I just want to just basically share from my own experience and what's worked for me, and then obviously, kind of leave it up to people to decide for themselves. Um, but I'm really excited about it because I love writing stories. I love telling stories and I like making people laugh and cringe and, all that stuff. But I also love having a decent message. And I think this is a fantastic message that we've all got.
So, what are some of the strategies you talk about in the book?
Well, unfortunately, I haven't been able to do exercise. Exercise is one of my favorite things. I used to run marathons and mountain marathons and do a lot of rock climbing and stuff, but I haven't been able to rely on that. For many years, I couldn't even go for a walk. But the last few years, I've been going for more walks, and literally in the last 2 months, I've started going to the gym. And when I go to the gym, it's quite funny because I'm by far the oldest and the most decrepit person in the gym. And I'm in Norway, so people are beautiful in Norway. So you go in the gyms in Norway, you've got some seriously good-looking people with incredible bodies, all of whom are at least half a foot taller than me. And so I just get to go in there and just kind of laugh at myself, this sort of puny old, nearly 50-year-old guy doing my thing. But what I do is I make sure that I enjoy the event of going into the gym. So I'm not just going to the gym to try and train and then see how it goes over the next few days. I'm going in to use really good form and really enjoy the movements, even though I'm like holding, I'm like bench pressing 20 kilos. It's so embarrassing. It's hilarious. But I'm doing it properly, and then I'm taking a break and I'm looking around all these beautiful people doing their thing and enjoying it. And so I think actually one of my strategies is to be in the moment as much as I can and really, really enjoy whatever I'm doing, not make it about what I'm going to achieve, because I might never be able to train properly. And I think I will. I'm an optimist, but I might not. So I've got to enjoy the moment. So that's one of them. Yeah.
If anyone,
Yeah, so critical to enjoy it. Like they always say the best kind of exercise is the one you're going to adhere to.
yeah,
So yeah, going to the gym is so fun, going outside for walks. I love to mix it up myself, go for walks. Like I've been sick for a few days, so I'll do walks instead, long walks in the sun. Hit cardio, treadmill, elliptical, rowing machine, lifting weights. Yeah, really like I was a huge like bodybuilder dude for many years and just like hitting the weights hard, all that stuff. And I've transitioned more to a little bit of a gentler routine with more variety now where I do some high intensity training, um, some weights as well, time outside, walks, flexibility, stretching, foam rolling, mobility, all this stuff. But like you're talking about, Oliver, like just trying to enjoy it, like trying to be there in the moment, listen to fun music, enjoy myself, make it sustainable. Because that's really the only way that I found myself that I can adhere to an exercise routine is by making it fun and doing stuff I like and not trying to force myself to do stupid stuff. Like if I'd rather go for a walk than lift weights that day, nowadays I'll just go for the walk and enjoy myself.
That's awesome. And do you know what's so cool about that? It's not only are you, strengthening your body and your mind, but by enjoying it, by having a good time, it's like your brain gets, or our brain, it gets more and more used to being in that state. So
yeah.
it's amazing. Like we can almost train ourselves not to be depressed by forgetting what it was like to be depressed.
When you say about bench pressing 20 kilogram weights, gym manufacturers, they need to make 20 kilograms look cooler because some of them have huge weights like this size that are 20. And I went to a new gym where they're like this size and it's 20. And I'm like, come on, guys. Like it looks like you're lifting half as much.
Totally.
But
They
yeah,
should just like
yeah,
have it the same
yeah.
radius for each of the plates and just make them thinner. I mean,
I'm
they do
actually,
that with Olympic plates, right? You shouldn't
I'm
have
actually,
to look like you're lifting a,
yeah.
a plate with a radius of whatever, 15 centimeters. I don't know.
It's a,
I'll
mo-
use a
it's a,
metric
mo-
system.
it's immoral to make a 20 kilogram weight that is that size. It's like, come on, guys, give us some
Totally.
credit. It has to look cool. The
Yeah, the good news is if we don't manage to reform mental health, at least we can afford
for
reform
real.
the weight training
This is
systems in America and Norway.
this is the side project. It's like I think I find lifting weights really helpful. Like it's just so kind of it's just so therapeutic. Like it switches off your mind because you're so focused on the weight, and I find it really helpful. It's actually one of the times I feel most relaxed is like lifting weights, which is kind of ironic. It seems like an intense activity, but it is super relaxing. Highly recommend it to anyone listening to the podcast.
And
Um,
metabolically healing as well.
yeah, totally. I mean, like if you're building your muscle, you're regulating your glucose because that's sucking up all the kind of glucose from your bloodstream. So definitely helpful. So yeah, I mean, and combining that with ketosis, there's a really good weightlifter actually called now what's his name? He's called Keto Gains on YouTube, and he's definitely worth looking up. But he's absolutely stacked. But he does it all in ketosis, and he has like protocols and weightlifting regimes. But it's very cool.
That's
Um,
cool.
so the and that's another side benefit of doing ketogenic diets. It introduces you to other forms of being healthy that like I never lifted weights at all before I did ketosis, and then I learned about it through this keto gains guy, and then kind of went on to learn about other healthy behaviors. So it's remarkable how that leads to other types of health that you kind of expected before. So with the book, I'm really excited to read that because the first one was excellent. It really describes such a great lived experience perspective, particularly the way you described depression and you described it as this like lack of energy and really kind of like being almost unable to move. I think you described it as being in like concrete or something like this. There was a kind of analogy similar to that in the book. So I'm really looking forward to hearing how you describe ketosis, because I'm sure it'll be a very vivid description of the experience. And another thing that's great is you won a recent award. You won the Fresh Start Award from Metabolic Mind. Do you want to share a bit about that experience?
Yeah, that was awesome. Yeah, I'm very grateful to you and your family, Matt, and Ian, to you as well for all the encouragement you've given me. Um, it was amazing. I never expected to get any kind of rewards for being mentally ill, if you like. You get into this space where, as you both know, you go through a lot more suffering than anyone else really knows unless they've been through it. And even when you write about it or you share about it, it's different. Depression is without doubt the worst thing probably a human being can experience. And there'll be lots of people saying, no, they could lose this, or so and so could die, or you could fall off a cliff.
Yeah.
And it's like, honestly, no, no, depression's worse. I remember when I was at my worst, I would have this might sound terrible, you might have to cut this, but I would much rather everyone I knew was killed, yeah, and my depression got better. It was that bad. Um, and people can't really understand that until they've gone through it. And obviously being manic is pretty terrible too, but usually it's the depressions that hit you afterwards that are really bad. Um, and so to get kind of recognized that I'd been through a tough time and to be given some money to help rebuild my life was just amazing, because there was this kind of like very sort of emotional thank you so much for seeing me and seeing what I've been through. Because most of the people who know me have no idea what I've been through. Most of my friends don't, most of my family don't. My mum and dad do, and my wife does, but basically no one else does. And so for you and your mum and your dad behind the scenes, um, to say, look, we actually understand, we know, and we're not just going to say we know, we're actually going to give you some money to do something positive. That was just like that was mind blowing to me, and I will be forever grateful. And it also gave me a direction because I've discovered a lot of cool stuff in my life. I do a lot of meditation. I actually became an Ishai monk in 2003, and I've been teaching meditation since then. And that's had a massive impact on my life. That's been very, very helpful with bipolar. Um, but to discover, I never really knew what direction to go, because when I've got out there with meditation, it's never really taken off. It's been helpful, but it's never done that. But when I got the Bazooki Award, I just knew, right, this is my job, is to get out there with keto and with the other strategies, and meditation is part of that, obviously. But it gave me a direction. And so this whole meaning and purpose that you both talk about a lot, that was crystallized. I'm one of these people is I like to respond to life. Before I was on Lithium, I was very good at creating stuff. I used to do a lot of art and all this stuff. But Lithium dulled me down, and it still does to a degree. But less. And so I prefer to respond to life. That's kind of my way of almost knowing I'm doing the right thing. And so when the Basuki Foundation said, look, if you're up for it, go for it with the keto stuff, go for your YouTube channel, go for it. And I'm like, yes. And so now, every week I'm making YouTube videos and I'm improving and investigating and doing all this. And yeah, it's been amazing. I can't describe how grateful I am and how cool it's been.
And you're also at the same time doing a master's degree in psychology. How is being ketosis being studied? Because I know you've studied before whilst on just on lithium. Has ketosis helped with because it's quite intensive doing a master's degree, and there's a lot of lectures to go to and things to deliver. Has being in ketosis been helpful for that process for you?
I don't think I'd still be doing the course if it wasn't for ketosis. There's no way. I mean, I'm still, to be honest, I'm struggling with it. Having been on lithium for God, 30 years, I mean, that's insane. Um, my brain's different. I find it almost impossible to remember facts and stuff like that. I mean, facts come to me. I mean, when we're talking, I look like I'm totally fine, and I am totally fine. But if we went outside and you guys gave me four numbers and said, right, walk around the block and come back and tell us what four numbers they were, I would have forgotten them by the time I was walking out the door. So that's been really difficult. But the university have been very helpful. They've been very kind. They've given me like longer time to do exams and stuff, and with open books. So that's kind of working. But to be honest, it's still in the balance. I'm really hoping to finish that master's because it'd be great to get it. And I'm two-thirds the way through. but I don't know if it's going to work out.
Oh, I think I mean you described in befriending bipolar like the difficulty of trying to work and trying to study, with bipolar, and it's just beyond what most people can imagine the difficulties you go through with that. So to be able to be doing your degree at all is quite remarkable, and to be doing it whilst also writing a book and doing many other things, I think it's really remarkable what you're doing, and I really commend you for it because it's hard for anyone to imagine how difficult the idea of a degree is for most people with bipolar. It's completely out with the realms of possibility for a lot of people with bipolar. So to be doing it and to be to working through it, even if there are still some challenges, is really remarkable, and I really commend you for that. So and I think having a master's degree in psychology is going to be really exciting as well because it informs your writing and advocacy work. So I'm very excited about that. I think it's just, even beyond doing a degree, most people with bipolar couldn't talk on a podcast like this. Like we have these conversations, we've spoken with like over these 28 episodes, and not a single time is anyone crazy or having, like everyone is more balanced than most people I speak to in normal life. That's my personal opinion. So I think it's people don't appreciate how hard even normal things are for bipolar to have a conversation and to do degree is very remarkable. So I think it's really exciting to see this kind of dynamic. There's not many clinical trials where people come out of it and want to write a book about their experience. I mean, I certainly would want to write a book about my experience with many things I experienced in treatment. So I think it's quite remarkable to see that. And we saw this in epilepsy when patients were saying, "Oh, I can no longer have, I can have no seizures. Like I could have a life of no seizures." They want to tell everyone about it, and I think this is what we're starting to see in bipolar as well. So what does the future look like for you? What do you hope to do with your advocacy work, with the Fresh Start Award and the book coming out? What are the things that you're looking forward to now that you're in a healthy place?
Well, I'm really looking forward to working in teams with people. That's why I enjoy the work I get from the Metabolic Hub. And I'm going to a conference in Paris thanks to the Basuki Foundation. And I love the fact that it's with other people. Like the last 20 years have been very solitary for me, and I'm quite a sociable guy. And so it's really good to do that. I'd love to be a YouTube sensation. I'd love to give lots of talks. I'd love for people to pick my brains from about lived experience. Basically, I'd like to serve. I'd like to make the world a better place, and I'd like to work in this area and hopefully get to a place which I don't think is unrealistic within the next 20 years where metabolic treatment is the first choice and psychiatric medication is reserved for acute situations or situations where it is deemed necessary and there's a time limit put on it to at least review it. So to sort of see a big paradigm change, and funnily enough, I don't think it's going to be that difficult because I think there are so many good people in the medical world and in the keto world who would just want solutions. And if people are presenting solutions, they can say, you know what, let's give it a go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to ask you about meditation before, because I have to sign off in a few minutes, but meditation has been a huge tool for me. Um, I've been doing it for years, and I've picked apart a lot of my thinking and a lot of my thought patterns and compulsive thinking, and a lot of it was very dysfunctional and still is, but it's getting much, much, much better. And I've been able to step outside of that stream of thoughts, read Eckhart Tolle. I'm sure you're familiar with all of this, and um, develop some metacognition. And now I associate with my thoughts less directly. So, like, my thoughts are not the ruling characteristic of my behavior. The ruling characteristic is my experience of life, my interpretation of others, being very, very present in the moment, or at least attempting to. And I ascribe less importance to my thought patterns, which are sometimes useful and sometimes crazy. And that's just been a result of doing meditation and sitting in stillness or going for a walk, really paying attention to the thoughts that are coming in, acknowledging them, but letting them pass, not getting involved in that stream of compulsive thought as much. And it's been a huge tool for me in terms of stress reduction, in terms of wellness, all of the above. Can you talk a little bit about your own experience with meditation?
Yeah, I can. I've tried a couple of types of meditation, but I'm going to talk about the one that I've done for 23 years because there's such a huge variation in meditation. And some of it is wonderful, and some of it is not so helpful, and some of it's probably a bit harmful, but not much of it. I don't generally have thought anymore. My mind's basically still most of the time. I experience that just quiet, content stillness, and I think that's Ian why you see me as being sort of calm and balanced. It's not really because of me. It's because I've connected with the stillness within, and I've cultivated a relationship with it, and now it's kind of taken over, which is lovely. And so when I'm kind of working or being creative, it comes much more from intuition now rather than linear thinking. Um, the meditation I do is called the Ashire's Ascension, as taught by the Bright Path. Luckily, the meditation is a lot simpler than the name, but it's very much a spiritual path. It's a pathway to enlightenment. It's a pathway to permanent peace. And when I kind of learned to ascend, which ironically was in Glastonbury in 2002, and I just quit being a trader at Merrill Lynch. So I was pumped. I mean, it's so funny how so many of us with bipolar, we make such crazy choices when it comes to careers or how we spend our time. And so I went to one of the most stressful working environments in any office you could be in. I mean, it's definitely not like being a fireman or anything like that. But um, I learned to meditate in Glastonbury, which is kind of the home to the Grail, the Holy Grail, and King Arthur and the knights and all those mysteries. And so I was thrown into this very sort of almost a mystical experience and taught this meditation that's actually very, very practical and very much kind of um, all about just being present and being alive and being peaceful. And as you've talked about, Matt, changing our relationship with our thoughts and with our feelings. The meditation's been amazing because over 20 years or so, it's allowed me to let go of so many of the negative habits I had within myself and so many of the patterns that were destructive and whatever. I needed lithium at the time because I needed something to just calm my bipolar mind down, and meditation was not going to be enough for me. I needed something biological. And now I believe that I need ketosis to do that. But when I'm stable, my goodness me, the meditation has completely changed my experience of life. Um, one of the reasons why I came off lithium the first time was because I bought into this belief that I don't need anything now because I've been meditating for a couple of years. I don't need the meds. Disaster, absolute disaster. I would never recommend anyone to just come off their meds no matter what they've learned. Even if they're doing ketosis, I wouldn't recommend they just do that. There's loads of stuff you have to do before then. Um, but when I'm well, it it makes me into such a peaceful, happy, alive person, and it gives me a positivity without me having to try to be positive. I used to get exhausted trying to be positive. It was miserable. It made me negative trying to be positive. But the meditation, it's made me more honest. Like I've been doing it for 23 years or something like that now, but I can still get up in the morning and say, "Oh God, I'm grumpy this morning," and just laugh about it. That's what I love about it. It hasn't made me into this peaceful zombie. It's made me into someone who, touch wood, as long as bipolar stays in the background, it's made me into someone who no longer suffers emotionally.
I
That's
got to sign off. Thank you, Oliver.
Cheers, man.
You
thank
guys
you.
keep going without me. I just got a work meeting.
Great.
Bye.
Bye.
Speak soon. Bye. Cheers. The so yeah, I mean it's wonderful to be on a podcast with someone that's been through a clinical trial that's really helped, and like you're describing not only being well and doing a master's in functioning and writing a book, but also having peace of mind, like clarity of mind. I mean, that is a rare thing for bipolar. So to hear that is very, very it's great to hear that from you don't hear that from many patient groups that you meet with. So I just think it's really yeah, been wonderful to get to know you after the trial and to hear about your experience, and now that you're sharing it publicly with people. And what would you say to anyone else who is interested in metabolic psychiatry and is hearing about this for the first time? You're mentioning, this isn't something where you just go and obviously never just come off your meds, or this is something to be done very seriously with a psychiatrist, with a dietitian. And even then, we're not saying this is for everyone. This is something that we're investigating through clinical trials and trying to understand. But what would you say to someone who's hearing this for the first time and they've heard about the peace of mind you found and the ability to function you found and wants to kind of explore this area more? What would you recommend to them?
Well, I think the first thing I would say is um, stay realistic. It seems so far, it seems from the very limited number of trials that have been done, many thanks to you, Ian, but it seems that keto is a really, really good potential treatment for bipolar and loads of other mental illnesses. And that the number of people that it works for and gives a better life to when they stay on their meds at the moment, that's the way the research has been, that it's looking really, really positive. But there are clearly some people at the moment that it doesn't work for, and probably we'll discover why. But at the moment, it's still there's a lot of mysteries around it. So it's not something that you can just jump into thinking, well, if I do this, I'm going to be fine, and kind of throw caution to the wind. Having said that, the results of these trials so far are incredibly helpful. And so my first suggestion would be if you're in a mental space where you can do it, get online and start investigating it. Listen to Matt and Ian's keto channels, this one. Listen to Metabolic Mind. If you want to have a good laugh, listen to Dr. Berry. He's brilliant and he's a serious character from the deep south in America, and he says things how they are. Um, and just do some investigating. And if you can't do that, which I couldn't do it when I was going on keto, then ask some of your friends to do it for you, to look into it and kind of get educated. Find out what can go wrong, what can go right, what are the best ways to do it, what are the hacks, but stick to those sort of mainstream channels that I've recommended, because these guys know what they're talking about. And there's a lot of nonsense out there too, so you've got to try and be discerning about that. Um, the second thing I would say is, particularly if you have a mental illness, I would get a nutritionalist who works with keto and has experience with mental illnesses to help you. And if you can, get your doctor on board. That's not always the easiest thing to do. And sometimes, I've gone to speak to doctors and it's like I end up feeling worse after trying to get them on board. And I'm like, oh my God. So that's a call you have to make. But as many good people as you can include rather than trying to do it yourself, I think that's going to make a big difference. So if you've got a sympathetic doctor, even one who just says, look, I have no idea if this is a good idea, but I'm willing to be there in the background in case it goes wrong, I think that could be hugely helpful.
Definitely, and that's the approach we took with the pilot trial. Is this was supervised by a psychiatrist and a dietitian trained in epilepsy, ketogenic diets, and so that combination of working with a psychiatrist and a dietitian is the most sure way to do this safely and to do this well. So I think there's a really exciting future ahead, and I can see in many ways you'll make a massive contribution to this field with your sharing your lived experience. And I'm really looking forward to reading your book. Where can people find your YouTube channel and your materials online?
Well, the best thing to do is to put my name, Oliver Seligman, into YouTube, and you'll find Living Better with Bipolar. It was called Thriving with Bipolar, but I thought that was a bit boasty. And as I still can't really train and do exercise, I didn't want to kind of claim that I'm totally thriving. I wanted to be a bit more realistic, so I changed it.
This is our British sensibility. It's like moderately, doing well with bipolar. This is like it's British are always quite underspoken. But yeah, it's a fantastic channel. I really recommend checking it out, and check out Oliver's book, Befriending Bipolar, one of the best lived experience books I've ever read. And hopefully we'll have you back on in some time when the book's out, and we can see how th far things have come by then. But thanks very much for making time today, and it was great to catch up with you.
Well, thank you. It's wonderful. I really appreciate it.